Hello everyone, it's lovely to be part of North Ronaldsay Science Festival this year, and today we're going to be in conversation. That's me, Fiona Sanderson.
And I'm Alison and
Nimmo. We're in conversation about one of our favourite subjects, which is limpets, and a study that we began quite some time ago now. And that arose from enjoying being on the shore, liking sea swimming, bonfires on the beach, that kind of thing. And limpets are so plentiful around Orkney, aren't they? And we wondered, is there some truth in the fact that limpets always return to the same place, their home scar, or is that a bit of a myth? And we started to wonder how we could test that. And that's something that's kept us quite busy, probably for the last 4 years now, hasn't it? And along the way, we've learned probably lots of things that we wouldn't have otherwise investigated too. For instance, on the screen here, you can see some fantastic, what look like fossil marks, but they're not, are they? They're limpet grazing trails. And just whilst those are up, I'll play you a bit of limpets grazing, a sound file that is only possible thanks to Orkney Field Club, who funded the purchase of a lovely sound recorder for us. So as I'm talking, I'm just going to bring up, here we go. If you've got headphones, put them on now. Limpets grazing. Just going to drop the volume on that, Alison. Do you want to explain what that sound is that we can hear?
Yeah, so that crisp munching sound is the limpet scraping some of the algae off the rocks, which creates these beautiful marks you can see here. And we'll get on to what that looks like underwater in a little bit. Because we also became curious, as Fiona mentioned, about whether limpets always return to their home scars, which you can see here on the rocks. There's two picked out by the shadow and sun in the sort of top left there. They're not always as obvious as that, but we did get the impression that limpets were very often returning to the same place on the rocks, and we were curious to know whether that was always true, or whether there was any migration to nearby places, any swapping of places.
And our first idea was just to select a very small cluster of limpets and paint the shells with something that would last for a few tides. And a friend of ours had a really great collection of nail varnish and was happy to sponsor us in marking up the limpets. And that was the first set of limpets that we looked at, wasn't it?
Yes, this is our original cluster. And amazingly, even several years later, the nail varnish is still going strong.
People often ask, is there a colour that's more durable than the rest? And we've done some extensive research into that now, haven't we? The red and yellow never seems to last as long as the metallic blue, which some of the spots of metallic blue have lasted, probably we're into the 5th year. So well done, Maybelline. But after a while, we realized that just taking photographs of limpets wasn't enough, and we needed to explore possibilities of filming them underwater. Neither of us had done anything like that before, had we?
No. So thanks to all those who gave us advice, including some of the divers around Stromness, we got a GoPro and with help worked out how to attach it to the rocks in a certain place where our first cluster of limpets was. We were a bit concerned about whether it would stand up to some of the conditions on this piece of shore. So there was a lot of cautious testing before we dared actually leave the camera out over a tide cycle. But all was well, and we got our first bit of footage.
It's lovely to see that again. That's one of our earliest films, isn't it, Alison?
Yeah, they weren't all as clear as that, but the seaweed was in our favor that tide.
And we've just watched that through, and I think we could probably watch that through again and just put some comments onto it. Are you happy with that?
Yes.
Here goes. So you'll notice that these 4 limpets haven't started moving until they're completely submerged. It's a little whelk that's just landed on a barnacle on the right side of the screen. And you get a sense of the sort of dynamic to and fro of the tide. And you can also see how they scrub to and fro. It's a very zigzag motion as they graze. It really explains those grazing marks, doesn't it? Come back to some photos, because I think, are we good to go on that?
Yes.
Ah.
So as we got more and more sucked into the world of limpets, we found ourselves exploring them in all kinds of different ways. One day we made a boat out of some kitchen items, which was very helpful. This is actually the wrong way up. The camera's underwater when it's floating. We also, thanks to the field club, as Fiona mentioned, were able to use an audio recorder with some hydrophones, which are the 2 black things you can hear, to actually record that sound you heard of the limpets grazing. And we just had many happy days investigating things on the shore. And really, as you know, as we built up these layers of footage of the limpets, we got to know the individual limpets and the patterns of behavior more and more. And as we watched more, we noticed more. So I think Fiona's got the next film, which shows a couple of of interesting things going on.
Okay. So from lots of the recordings that we'd made already, we saw the limpets consistently returning to the home scars. And that went on for months. And then something different happened, and we'll play you another film now, which is just the beginning of a change for the limpets. I just need to share my screen. So it's coming shortly. Here we are. Yeah, there we are. That was a little glitch at the beginning. You can see the tide rising and the 4 limpets that are marked up with the red nail varnish, you can see still in their usual order, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Number 3 with the seaweed fascinator moving out first. And can you spot the limpet on the left that's just inching its way along and appears to kind of be investigating that ledge where the 4 limpets' home scars is? Now, I'm going to see if I can just put this video onto double speed. Here we go. So there's a lovely bit of zigzag grazing going on right at the front of the screen here. And lots of limpet activity, not just our marked limpets. Number 3 is recognisable on the left because of its seaweed fascinator. They're all returning, and look, the one that's unmarked appears to be knocking on the doors of all those different home scars and ends up on the left-hand side. As I say, that was chapter 1 of a news story that went on for several months. As that limpet took the place of one of the marked limpets, number 1. And just going to stop screen sharing. Okay. And then the other limpets responded by having to move their positions. And then the new limpet, which we came to think of in a friendly way as the interloper, moved along to the next home scar. And over several months, there was just a succession of changes. And the limpets were in different positions, probably, well, for many times over those months, until that interloper carried on moving towards the right of the screen that you can see there, and eventually right out of the picture. And again, within a few weeks, our limpets 1, 2, 3, and 4 had returned to their original home scars. So there's quite a lot to think about in terms of what had caused the limpets to respond, and why had the interloper chosen to move on from its original position, somewhere that we'd never seen it. Its journey has presumably carried on elsewhere. And just to finish up, I'm not sure what pictures we have coming next, Alison, but should I just explain the position of the limpets that right now, as in 2021?
Yes.
The number 4 disappeared completely last year. And even Alison can verify that. She's a lot better at spotting them than I am when they go AWOL. Number 4, we think, is gone. And number 3 has moved on to a different ledge just around a corner, maybe 1 or 1.5 meters away. So we've been left with just our limpets 1 and 2. And very recently, another limpet has moved in between those 2. So we'll carry on filming those, won't we? But there's an interesting pattern of succession, which means we can't actually definitively say, yes, limpets always do return to the same home scar. There's something a lot more subtle happening. So let's put that question down for now and move on to some more images.
So while we were studying the limpets, we came across lots of other interesting things on the shore. It was interesting the way this process of looking more closely at the limpets and going back week after week after week just made us so much better at noticing everything else going on. So here we have a nice photo of limpet poo. We also came across by the wind sailors in this year, which we'd never come across before. Lots of sea slugs, stalk jellyfish, something else we'd never noticed before. And altogether, this time really had a big influence on Fiona's work as an artist and creator.
Yes. And that's to do, I think, with that same business of looking deeply over a long period of time at one place and noticing all of the cycles that go on. And so either you or I would walk to see the limpets most days, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Equally, you were working on the Hamnavo for some of that time. And I don't know about you, but I was super aware of tide times when high tide and low tide were happening. And it was there's something very profound about looking at something as seemingly transient as life in a rock pool against those Hoy hills which appear timeless, and thinking, the cycle of Alison on the Hamnavo, me walking the same patch of shore every day, really did something to my creative practice. I work in metal a lot anyway, and I'd started to think about sundials and how to capture time. And in fact, that theme feels sort of etched into my work now. I've done a lot of sculptural projects to do with the passing of time and cycles of time that sort of happen in circles or a shape that isn't linear anyway. So I wanted to include that because the theme of the Science Festival this year is innovation. And for me, there was something unexpected and wonderful about the way my creative practice was changed, given a big injection of energy or perhaps a fairer wind. I'm not quite sure how to put it. And that felt very lovely. Have we got other things to say about innovation?
It certainly changed how I think about teaching now, probably. So since this couple of years in Orkney, when we were very limpet focused, I've actually moved south and trained as a primary teacher. And when teaching science or geography or really anything, this kind of study is at the back of my mind now, because it was not how I had I think understood a study of the shore to be. We started not with a hypothesis that we wanted to test. We started just by spending a lot of time in a place and really getting to know it and noticing things that then raised questions in a much more organic way. So I do think about that when I'm thinking about shaping the days and the weeks of my primary class in the place I live now, which is the Isles of Scilly.
Mm. And we've talked about limpets to various audiences, haven't we? And thanks to Penny Martin of Orkney Field Club last year, we had a chance to present some of our films at a marine scientist conference, Porcupine Conference, which was in Oban last year. And something rather exciting came out of that, because there are an audience of people who knew their mollusks, let's put it that way. And they were very surprised to see the films of limpets moving at high tide, i.e. underwater. And it appears that limpets around the UK behave quite differently. So thanks to Alison moving to Scilly, we've now got a chance to move into another phase of this project. So over to the Scilly limpets.
So when I moved to Scilly, obviously, one of the first things I did was to get out the nail varnish again. And as before, we started without any technology, just watching some limpets to see what they did. And it was clear they behave quite differently from Orkney limpets. So I found these limpets grazing when the tide was out after dark, and then also during the day. It's interesting to think about the very different landscapes and the effect that that might have on the behavior. So this is Orkney again, with beds of sandstone. Scilly is very much dominated by granite, which creates a much more bouldery shore usually, which might have something to do with the difference in behavior. There's been a lot of limpets grazing on top of each other that I've come across. And again, I don't know quite what's going on there, why that's a useful foraging grazing pattern. But we're hoping, thanks to a generous grant from the Porcupine Marine Natural History Society that ran the conference in Oban, we're going to get another little camera and start studying, watching the limpets as they graze below or out of the tide. It's required a bit more innovation as well, because with the granite being very hard and bouldery, it makes more sense this time. We've worked out to strap the GoPro to the boulders rather than try and drill. So I've already got some positions in mind for when we get that going, hopefully in the next month or two. And we have a website where we'll be hopefully sharing some more films as we get them of Orkney or Scilly, which is called By the Wind Sailors, if you're keen to follow what happens next.
Oh, it's been nice looking at all those things again, Alison.
Just ready for spring.
Yes. Yep. Time to start fettling some bits of equipment, it feels. Okay. Well, that's been lovely. I hope you've enjoyed that presentation. Find us at By the Wind Sailors online, and or walk round ashore and you'll probably find one or other of us or somebody else who's interested in studying limpets along the way. Enjoy the rest of the festival. We'll look forward to seeing some of the other presentations, and also perhaps visiting for real one day. Okay, bye for now, everyone.